Hey guys, Dave from Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds, and today I'm hanging out with Shawn Merwin, and hopefully I'm not butchering your last name too badly.
It's pretty much like it's spelled, Mer and Win.
I like it when things are actually pronounced the way they are spelled. I do much better.
Yep.
So you're one of the guild adepts. You've been in and around the industry for the past 15 years or so. At least that's what your bio says.
Yep.
And I was looking over the stuff you've done, and there's been a ton of stuff. And we were just talking a little bit about how you had gotten into it, and you kind of came back with third edition after having played as a kid, and getting involved with the Living Greyhawk campaign.
Mhm.
So, from there, that kind of led you to designing by happenstance.
Yeah. Yep. I did work in Living Greyhawk, just first as just a volunteer contributor, and then as a triad member, which were one of the three people that would take care of a region of the campaign. Since I live in New York, my region was the land of Keoland in the Greyhawk, and we were covering New York, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. Um, and there are no grumpy people in Philly or New York or New Jersey, so that was very smooth. Excuse my sarcasm, but no, it was actually a great region. But then I got noticed by people at Wizards of the Coast for the work I'd been doing, so they asked me to work on a project and then another project, and it just kind of steamrolled from there.
I find it a little refreshing, your reference to sarcasm, because dealing with a lot of people on the other side of the coast, they don't get it as much. It's part of our vernacular and how we talk.
Yeah, I'll have to hold up my sarcasm sign, when I.
No, absolutely. So right now you're a guild adept, and how did that come about?
I was innocently sitting at my computer one day, and Chris Lindsay at Wizards of the Coast sent me an email and said, "We're going to be doing this new program. This is kind of what it's about. Are you interested?" And I said, "Hell to the yeah! Sign me up. I don't even know what you're talking about, but sign me up." And so that after that, he sent out some more information about what would be involved with that. Different projects that he would suggest people working on. Then I saw the list of the other people that were going to be in the program to begin, and there were some names I had worked with before, names I recognized, people who I had never worked with but wanted to work with, and some brand new names. So I thought, I've collaborated over the years with many different people in many different ways. So let's see what happens if we try this. And so far, it's been a great experience.
So actually, I won't ask that because I don't want to put you on the spot. Who are the names that you saw and like, oh, I want to work with this person?
Oh, like Rich Lescouflair, I had worked with on a previous adventure for Wizards. James Intricasso, I had worked with. Uh, had I worked with him at that point? I think I had talked with him. I'd been on his podcast for a couple of times. Um, I may have worked with him on an adventure before that or after that. I can't remember, but it was exciting to see his name. Monica Valentinelli, who is a big name in the industry, not necessarily for D&D, but for other games, was on that list. Claire Hoffman, who was an Adventures League admin, was on the list. So, just these names kept popping up, and everyone was like, yeah, oh, yes, yeah, and it just kept going. So I thought, what could it hurt, right? Make some stuff, meet some new people, share some stories, share some processes, see how it goes, see what I learn.
So what exactly does it mean to be in the Guild of Depths? I guess I was looking at. We just see kind of like the chosen from Watts. Like they're the you guys. They kind of handpicked you guys. But what is the difference between someone that's a guild member and or an adept member and someone who's not?
Really, I think the only difference is we get a sneak peek at what the next project coming from Wizards is going to be, so we can review that and then come up with a plan for what sort of products we could come out with to support that. Other than that, we get our works put in a little special place on the DMsGuild, and we get to work with the people I had mentioned. That's really about it. So if, say, someone's a playtester and they have access to the playtest material for the next product coming out, they really have just as much of a lead as we do. So you'll see people who put up, you know, the guide to Tomb of Annihilation the day after the book is released. You know, whether they got it through a review or through playtesting, you know, they have just as much of a lead time as we do. So, you know, in that sense, it's just a little bit of attention thrown our way. That probably the products that these people make are at least passable, if not good.
Excellent. Because you know, we actually had James on yesterday, and like I said to him, you definitely see on the internet confusion among, you know, the customers and fans as to what the Guild Adepts are and their connection to Watts. Some people, you see them talking, the way they talk, you can only surmise that they think it's one and the same.
Right. And it's definitely not. Although, you know, I don't think Wizards sits down and reviews our products. They might review it to see if it's going to be legal for Adventures League play, for example, but they're not editing it. They're not, you know, going through and doing a development pass or anything like you would do if you were freelancing directly for Wizards. But with the people they've put together, we edit each other's work and we check each other's work. So it is probably going through the hands or the eyes of someone who has been in the industry a while, who may not be as, excuse the pun, adept as Wizards would be. But, you know, I've edited my share of content over the years, probably hundreds of adventures. So I know what I'm looking for and I can kind of help out. And someone else who's great at layout can do that for me. And, you know, we can share each other, you know, share ideas. So it's going through a process that's probably a little different than someone who's not involved in a big community like ours.
When the DMs Guild was announced and first opened up, were you already writing there?
Yeah, I was one of the people. They said, we're going to be doing this and we want content up when it opens. So could you work on something? And so I had this vague idea that it was happening. So I had started working on a product called 5 Temples of the Earth Mother, Life and Moon. And so we were, me and a few other people I work with at a company called Encoded Designs. We're kind of just, you know, let's scope this out. Let's do an outline. And then we got the email, oh, by the way, we're going live next week. So we put it into overdrive and we got the product wrapped up quickly and up there and ready to go for the launch. And there were, I would say, probably, I don't know the exact number, but if I were to guess, probably a dozen or so other people that also got that notice, so they could have content ready to buy when the DMs Guild opened.
Cool. So Elfbait has a question about the DMs Guild.
Okay.
He wants to know what the rules are on art in the DMs Guild.
Okay, I am not a lawyer. I think what they decided to do with art is, if you have custom art that you have someone create or you create yourself and you put it into a product, that is not something that other people can use. Anyone else or any of the other content, anything you write, anything you develop or design for the guild, that is stuff that's part of the open gaming license, so other people can then use it. The only thing that is restricted from that open rule is any custom art you have created to put in. I'm hoping that's the answer that he was looking for, or she.
Elfbait is a he, but okay. Hopefully. So you had mentioned you work with, you know, you have a company you work with, Encoded Design, and you also have a podcast you do as well.
Yep. Down with D&D.
What was that?
Oh, the podcast is Down with D&D, part of the Misdirected Mark podcast network.
Yeah, I'm looking because I knew I messed that up in the description. I have the Misdirected Mark podcast, but it should be network, and the actual name of it is Down with D&D. I'll have to correct that.
No problem. We'll take any and all marketing we can get.
So by chance, do you guys talk about D&D over there?
You know, you would think that with a name like that, the last thing we did was we interviewed Lisa Chen, who was one of the other guild adepts. And the first thing we were talking about was knitting. So we were going to change the podcast name to Down with Knit and Pearl. But except for that one instance, we generally talk about D&D. We try to go from, you know, news of the hobby to news of the brand itself to down to, you know, very specific rules, crunchy analysis of the game. So we try to hit a wide range of topics during the show. And we usually try to do it once a week for about 45 minutes.
So are you a prolific knitter as well?
No, I wish I were. I, you know, yeah, I've heard that knitting is the first, the gateway to crocheting. So I have to be careful.
Yeah. We don't want you to accidentally become a hooker.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I see what you did there.
So, you know, of all the products you worked on and you know, that you can remember you worked on, because we had a discussion about that earlier a little bit, where you're like, people will come up to me and be like, hey, I love what you did on so-and-so. And you're like, I'm sorry, that wasn't me. Until they have to like show your name in the book and prove it to you.
Right. I'm like, oh yeah, I did write those words, didn't I?
So what is your favorite project you've worked on at this point?
I think probably the one that at this moment when I think about it, is the Halls of Undermountain for 4th edition. It was a chance for me to work on an actual hardcover published Wizards product, and not only do that, but do it in one of the most famous places in D&D, Undermountain. So it took a lot of research and a lot of overcoming fears of what people were going to say. Oh, he ruined Undermountain. It had the misfortune of coming out at the very end of 4th edition. I think it was like the last hardcover 4th edition book that was published. So by that time, there was already rumors of a new edition, and people were jumping ship and all thing. But it really was a fun project to work on, and it really taught me a lot about the industry as a whole, because I worked on this from soup to nuts. Started right at the beginning when it was supposed to be a certain product, and then by the time we got to the end, it was a completely different type of product. And so I got to see the kind of inner workings of the business side of things, which even as a freelancer, you often don't see.
So we have a question in the chat. Do you play Magic the Gathering?
I have played it probably 3 times.
So this may not even be a good question for you, and it's definitely not a good question for me. But I'll throw it out there for the chat so you guys can discuss amongst yourself. That's better lore, Dungeons and Dragons or Magic the Gathering. I know so little about Magic the Gathering, could not even begin to weigh in on that.
Yeah, better lore. That's that is a great question, and I've actually heard people who know better than I discuss this, and I've heard intelligent, informed people have good conversations where they agree to disagree, basically. So I wish I could give you a better answer than that, but I think if you're into both, that probably you could make an argument either way.
Yeah, Patrick Harper, better question mark. Better is very subjective as well, in depending where you stand. But I will say I am a diehard RPG fan, Dungeons and Dragons. But I will say Magic the Gathering probably has better art because there's so much more of it, and Magic the Gathering just generates so much more revenue that they can just throw more money at that, and it definitely affects the quality of a product.
Oh yeah, and you're always looking at the art when you're playing, right? When you're running D&D, you open your book, you close your book, you go to the table, and you're looking at all the beautiful people that you play with. When you're playing Magic, always got that art in mind. So I would say that art is probably much more important in Magic than it would be for D&D or another RPG.
I think Brian Stillman would disagree. He's working on the Eye of the Beholder, the Art of D&D right now.
Oh,
we're all anxiously awaiting. It's actually going to be a really cool product because he's like talked to everyone that's ever worked in the industry and touched any of the art.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
He's
you think of some of the iconic art over the years, from old Dragon magazines to, covers of. It's just so indicative of how the hobby's changing, and even how the people who create want you to see the game. It's an interesting field to look at that.
he's a fellow New Yorker too.
Oh, is he?
Yeah,
We
absolutely.
won't hold that against him, though.
So, and also, but along the vein of that question of lore, what do you prefer? What is your favorite campaign setting? Because you cut your teeth with Greyhawk, and you just talked about working in Forgotten Realms.
Yeah, it's my favorite. This is a cop out answer, but my favorite one's the one I'm working with at the time, because there's so much I don't know that when I start a project, the first thing I do is go back and look at the lore, and then I get drawn into that to the point where you almost have to pull yourself out. It becomes kind of addictive, and you could just get lost. So, I mean, I started with Greyhawk. The next thing I worked on was Zendrik Expeditions campaign, so there was Eberron, and then I worked on some Dark Sun projects, so I got into that. The only thing I haven't written in directly is Planescape. No, I haven't worked in Spelljammer either, so I haven't worked in those two worlds. I think I've got pretty much all the other big ones covered, and they each fulfill a different niche. They scratch a different itch. I just rhymed there. Niche itch. Okay, that won't happen again. And so I love going into a different world, running a different kind of campaign, like running a heist campaign in Sharn, is awesome. Then you can't do the same things that you could if you were trying to run that in Dark Sun. But running a survival game in Dark Sun is much different than if you tried to do that in Forgotten Realms. So there's just so much good content out there. I can't really say I love one any more than the other. I love them for their differences.
I almost feel like Eberron is the only world you can run any kind of game in.
Yeah. I can see that because you have because of the lands and the magic and the story behind it, really focused. With Greyhawk, it was throw everything in. With Forgotten Realms, it was throw everything in because they were the only ones that were there, the only big ones that were there for a while. But the story that came in with Eberron was really tightly focused, and they picked and chose what they wanted to do specifically, so you could run those different kinds of games. Run a noir post World War II ish thing here. Down in Zendrik, you could run the wild jungle scenarios. So it was well done in that sense.
So, Shalender, Eberron and Forgotten Realms are way too magic heavy for my taste.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. I mean, we're playing Dungeons and Dragons where you're throwing around fireballs, though. So,
yeah,
at a certain point, it's like, I just shrug my shoulders.
Yeah, what I would do when I was running campaigns is I would do something in Eberron or Realms, and everyone had magic, and then I would go back and do a Dark Sun campaign where if you found a metal weapon, you were doing well, and it's just a different way to tell a cool story. And as long as your players are cool with it, then have fun with it and run the way your players like.
So, Duel 810 asks a question. Now, I don't know if this question is relevant to you, so we can skip it if it's not. Will there be any updated Waterdeep guides? I still use Volos. Did you write Volos?
No, I didn't write Volos.
I didn't know if there was any guides in the DMs Guild. Like, there's always like side stuff.
Yeah, there's always something. I think the Forgotten Realms Player's Guide might have been the last. Although Volos had some stuff, I think the Forgotten Realms Player's Guide from 5th edition was probably the last one that had a decent amount of information on Waterdeep. But as long as Wizards continues to put out books in the Forgotten Realms, it can never be too long before they go do something with Waterdeep, because it's too great an area not to use. whether it's above ground or under mountain below.
But not only that, too, like if you find the stuff from previous editions, a lot of that's really easy
Yeah.
to convert and use for your game,
Yep.
especially anything. I find anything pre third edition, you can almost do a direct conversion.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, think of it in terms of if you were writing it, what would you do? You'd go back and do exactly what you just said. You'd go back, you'd do your research, and you'd think, okay, how much time has passed? How might things have changed? But for the most part, the things aren't going to change all that much. They figured that out with the spell plague, that people didn't necessarily always want these big massive changes. So I think other than maybe some NPCs changing, and even then that's pretty rare because there's potions of longevity of some sort or another, so those NPCs can hang around forever.
So Jason wants to know if you have any interest or will be doing any 5e Playscape content.
Not that I'm aware of at this time.
Oh, and they can't anyway, right? They have to, the Watts has to release it before you can work in the DMsGuild stuff.
Yep. So anything guild related, you have to wait until Wizards. They did that with Ravenloft, which was cool. They said, but Planescape is a tough one because it's the guild says everything you do has to be in either the Forgotten Realms or now they've opened it to Ravenloft. But they, Planescape touches everything. So I've seen people try to say, well, I could do it's in the realms, but then there's this portal and it goes to this place and let's call it Figil.
Yeah.
Or something. But Planescape is like Waterdeep. I think Wizards probably has a plan to release a lot of the stuff that people are clamoring for, and it may not be immediately, and it may not even be within the next couple of years, but at some point, in some way, they know that there's an audience out there for that content, and as long as it's feasible to create in a way that doesn't break the bank, they will find a way to create it or open it up on the guild. Who knows?
And there's definitely some things that they've snuck in, like Al-Qadim. They're like, oh, that's part of the realms now.
Yeah, there you go. And you're starting to
now.
see people, doing that work. So that's great.
Yeah, I believe Dan Dillon did a piece in there.
Yep.
Recently. So that's definitely cool as they open up more stuff. But they've been very deliberate in everything they've done with 5e. And instead of like shotgun blasting everything, there seems to very much be a plan in place.
Yep. Yeah, and I think they've finally learned a lesson after however many editions and seeing other game companies go through the same thing of the old publishing death spiral, where you put out one thing and it sells like this, and then as you put out more and more and more, that your audience goes down. And what they've found is to slow down their releases and to have better plans for marketing and have better plans for growing the hobby as a whole. The last book that came out, Xanathar's Guide to Everything, is selling better than like any supplement ever, and that's years, 2-3 years after the release of the original books, which shows you that they are the slower process, and the way that they're envisioning how to grow the game is really working well.
So Tucker Author wants to know, do you use the other DMsGuild writer stuff in your own games? You guys write a lot of stuff together. So to me, it would seem like if you use your own stuff for the more recent stuff, it's all mingled.
Yep. Yeah. I buy stuff from the guild all the time. We sometimes review it on Down with D&D. If people send us stuff, and I also work with Baldman Games, who Dave Christ is the president of Baldman Games. They do the organized play work for Wizards at Origins, Gen Con, and Winter Fantasy. And so one of the things that we do with Baldman Games is create adventures for their convention created content series. And so I'm always going through the guild and looking for people to write for some of those adventures. And so I've always got my eye on things, and I'm hoping to start doing my own reviews of content there, because I think there are a lot of great voices out there that just are waiting to be heard. And if I can help promote that, that's something I really want to do.
Now, you have a day job. you have, you know, the DM Guild Adept thing going on and creating content over there, coded design, podcast. Do you actually even get to play the game?
I do. I do. Not as much as I would like, to be honest. Um, and if I was more comfortable playing online, I would be able to play even more. But I have a regular home game where we either play one of the Wizards products, play testing of upcoming Wizards products, or play testing of products that I'm working on either by myself or with another group. So I am playing quite regularly. Not as much as I'd like, but enough. So yes, I am definitely playing the game, as well as other games, because I've also worked on Star Trek, and I've also done some writing for um, Pelgrane Press for the Dracula dossier. So, I'm also looking at other games to see how that might inform the games I'm working on.
Which it makes sense. So non D&D, what's your favorite game to play?
Oh, my favorite game to play non D&D right now. I'm enjoying the various flavors of Fate, because I think it's a great game to use a kind of lower barrier to entry rules to bring people in. My daughter loves Doctor Who, and she wants to play a Doctor Who game. And Cubicle 7 makes one that I've played, but it's just a little too big for what we want. So I created a Fate Doctor Who game for her. And so we played, and they were traveling through time and running from the police, and all these cool things. And we could create a character in 15 minutes, and all they needed are those 4 little plus minus blank dice, and we were having fun. So that's a game I'm really digging, for all the things you can do with it as a little bit lighter rules game.
Do you prefer core or accelerated?
When we did the Doctor Who, we did accelerated, um, and I think for that intro to role playing for people, I think accelerated works well. But like the full Fate, you can do a few more things. You can add a few more, you know, plug in a couple extra modules for people who are a little more advanced role players, to get an extra system in there, to tweak it a little bit, to make it more or less like other games that they love.
Now, I think I actually prefer accelerated, to be honest with you, because I feel like you can play more games faster with that system, where you could just get in and be like, I want to play this, or have a player tell you what they want to do, and you're like, all right, here it is, and you have like a great abstraction for whatever it is you're trying to do.
If I was going to run a one shot, I would definitely always do it in accelerated. If I was going to try to make a campaign out of it, I might do it in Fate Core, just to make it a little meatier, maybe. But yeah, we're probably splitting hairs at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. The whole Fate system is great, and actually the Dresden Files Fate book is like one of the best written books I've read.
Yeah.
As far as being entertaining and engaging while you read it,
Right.
A lot of the books, even and D&D is really guilty of this. When you read them, they're instruction manuals, and that's literally what they are, and that's what you're reading, and that's not very exciting.
Yeah, my background's in technical writing, so I completely understand that. So, sometimes it was hard for me to do technical writing during the day, then switch over, and I started to write adventures or rules. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is turning into just more technical writing. I need to add something to this because it's getting a little bit dry. Click the A drive. No.
Which is fine. Like when you need a book to teach you the game, that's what it needs to do. But when you're digging into a new system and it's like 300 plus pages, it does definitely help if it's a little more engaging. That's why when I go to new games, I just try and find people that are already running it.
Yep.
And be like, just set me up with a character and let's just play, and I'll learn that way.
Right, and that's exactly right. Over the years, no matter when you started playing, did you start playing by reading the book, or did you start playing by sitting down in the game and playing? And for most people, it's the latter. And now you can even add a C version to that is, did you learn by watching people play on the internet? And so I think we're in an era now where we can start to make the books more entertaining and maybe less rules heavy, because there are other methods to actually learn those rules. So it doesn't have to read so dry and you still want to be clear, but you don't have to make it boring clear. You can make it kind of fun, while you're being clear, because you always know that you have those podcasts out there where people are playing, where people can learn.
Yeah, I think at this point, Matt Mercer is responsible for bringing more new people into the hobby than any DM ever.
Well, I think it was Nathan Stewart, who's the brand manager of D&D, said that they've had this explosion of new players, and at least 50% of those new players that they did a survey with came in through an actual play podcast, which makes perfect sense, and it's totally amazing. And old guys like us who don't equate internet to game, like we were talking about earlier, are just like, oh yeah, this internet is here for these things.
Even when we got started, like we started playing our games and putting them online, but we're like, we don't even know why we're doing this, because who wants to watch this? And our production value for that kind of stuff is so shitty, it's not even funny. But still, like, you put up a game and like 500 people will watch it.
Yeah, it's funny because people have said, why don't you record your games? And I'm like, because I don't want to be arrested or deported. Probably a good reason why I don't, with the crew I play with. But
now I want to play in one of your games.
Exactly.
Hey, maybe you're only a couple hours away.
That's right.
Depending where you're in New York.
Oh, I'm on the far wrong end of New York. I'm Buffalo area.
Oh yeah, you're up there for sure.
Yep. So I'm closer to
Canada while I'm there.
Yeah, I'm closer to Indianapolis than Manhattan. Let's put it that way.
Nice. Well, I've done some work up in like the Albany area and stuff in the past, and that's a bit of a drive.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, it takes me 5 hours driving east to get to Albany. So
yeah.
That shows you how far west I am. If I take one more step, I'm into Erie, Pennsylvania. So it's way out there.
Pennsylvania area, huh?
Oh yeah, I grew up in Pennsylvania area.
I'm sorry.
Oh, hey, I survived.
You survived, and now you're making awesome things for us to play with.
That's a good point, though, is I really did grow up in an area where things like education were not highly valued, let's put it that way. And it took a game like D&D to get my mind, interested in different things, in the math of the game, in the physics of, hey, I just shot a lightning bolt into a wall. At what angle did it come off? And the appendix N there, where Gygax gave all the books that he'd read. And that helped inspire me. So this game has meant a lot to me, just in terms of my own, life path, which is kind of a cool thing.
There's like two train of thoughts, especially like from our era, right? When your kid came home with D&D books. One, oh my God, they're reading, they have a book. Or two, oh my God, they're going to hell. They now belong to Satan.
I wasn't in an area that was highly religious either, so that was a good thing, in that sense, where I was able to play. And my parents had no idea what the game was. They just knew that I was at a friend's house and coming home at midnight. That's fine, whatever.
My parents were basically kind of hippies, and there was times when they probably didn't even know they still had children. So so what I was doing was never a concern. So we never really saw the satanic panic. It was something like we joked about.
Right.
We were aware of it, but it was like something that was going on TV.
Exactly. We only got 2 channels where I live, so it wasn't like we saw much on TV either.
Oh, well, we must have been in a much better area because we got 5. It was like 3, 6, 10, and then there was like 17 and 27 or something like that.
Yeah.
Is what I recall. So guys, let's jump into the roll call. We don't have too many people on today. We're hanging out around 50, 65-ish. So we usually do this thing where we jump into the roll call and let people sound off where they're watching from. But the last couple episodes, we've been like 80, 90, 100 people. And after doing that a couple times, I'm like, there's got to be a cutoff for a number of people in the chat to do the roll call. Not only that, I'm so horrible at pronouncing screen names and where people are from anyway. By the time I'm like exhausted. So we got Geek and Undies in Circleville, Ohio. Stuck in Woodinville again is Fragginator. We got Louisiana in the house with Ghetto Stabulous. Belgrade, Serbia in the house with Duel 810. AJ Kinney, Lopez Island, Washington. We got KB in Missouri. Boston at Acolyte 14. We've got Rio Rancho, New Mexico. Shallender in the house. DM Don is in Philly. Comrade 2261, Lynn, Massachusetts. Missouri with Ranger Roy. Ovadu is in Transylvania, hanging out with Dracula. We got Ranger 1, Sacramento, California. We got Do Stuff is in Denmark. Granite City, Illinois is John. Belgium. We've got Benjamin in Phoenix, Arizona. We've got Lincoln in Sweden. We've got Dana in California. We got False Prophet in Ohio. Ukraine in the house with Blunt Man. Quebec, Canada in the house with Sylvain. Martin. What's that?
I work with people from Ukraine and Lviv.
Oh, cool. And Martin is in Illinois, Montana with Arthur Tucker. We also got Evil Silly Putty in Minnesota. West Philly representing Cardboard Fortress. Ohio with 005005. Florida with Richard Adams. Utah, Virgilio. San Antonio with 49th. Lewisburg, Kentucky in the house with Jason. St. Clair is in Michigan. Or no, I'm sorry. Chris Marino is in St. Clair Shores, Michigan. St. Cloud, Minnesota was Ditch Newman. We've got Sweden in the house with Tristan. We've got Brazil in the house with KO. There's too many vowels. I can't read that. Fantasy Grounds College is in Seattle, Washington, and we've got Brian in the Midwest, Michigan. So all over the place, which is always really cool. And now I'm out of breath, like I said. I think like 65 is going to be my cutoff. See, now they're starting to jump back into the roll call once I start, so they're weighing in again. But it's always amazing. So, we discussed like what was your favorite project that you have worked on? Do you have one, in mind that you want to work on that you haven't yet?
Somebody mentioned Planescape. I think that would be the next step I would love to go to, because it is such a, for those people that like played the Planescape Torment game online and then got into the role-playing version, that is such a cool it's a cool setting that leads to many other cool settings. And so if there was a project that involved that, I would be all over that like you would not believe.
Well, I imagine it's just a matter of time before they open up Planescape.
Yeah, I would say, like I said, anything probably will be coming. It's just a matter of how long and in what order they do it.
Oh, so Geeking Undies says Fantasy Grounds College is a great question. Okay, so I think this kind of dovetails back to what you were saying about gaming online.
Mm-hmm.
So Fantasy Grounds is a great virtual tabletop, and they have the Fantasy Grounds College, which is a bunch of volunteers, and they basically do tutorials and teach people how to play. Like, I literally had a question, and I went into their Discord server and asked it, and the next thing you know, they like shanghaied me into a video chat, and were like walking me through doing what I was trying to do.
Yep.
And I was like, I just wanted a place to go read and learn how to do the thing. So, yep. Would you come over to Fantasy Ground College and play test your own product in FG format? We have a DM that is changing it over to virtual tabletop.
Many of my products I've made sure got a Fantasy Grounds version. I have tried to use Fantasy Grounds before, but like we've talked about, I will sit down for 2 hours and I will play around with it, and I will get to a point where I'm like, oh man, I don't know what to do now. And then I'll be like, I could spend another 2 hours doing this, or I could go work on this project I'm working on. And it's always been that back and forth. But I definitely am going to be getting into uh, online tabletop games, Fantasy Grounds, Roll20, all of them that I can in the near future. So knowing that Fantasy Grounds College is there is a great bit of information that I will note, and I'm sure that you will see me, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but within the next couple of months, I will definitely be shouting out for help in getting my own Fantasy Grounds game going.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain if you were to go over there, they would co-pilot. You could probably find someone to co-pilot for you, and take like some of the tech stuff off your plate.
Yeah,
and ease you into it. I'm blown away by those guys are aggressively helpful.
oh. you will be helped.
You will be helped whether you like it or not.
No, that's great. I mean, it's important in this day and age to have um, that sort of community there to make sure that everything gets the attention it needs.
I had to go seek out my favorite enemy in the chat real fast. Usually we have a moderator or two in there, but not today. So eventually, it's only a matter of time before the cam girls start showing up. And they have to be blocked. So thanks, chat, for pointing that out. Appreciate it. I wouldn't mind. They could stay and they could come and hang out. They would just talk about D&D with us.
There you go.
I'm not picky. So what are you going to do? What do you get? So I know what I wanted to ask you about. So do you primarily play in campaign settings or homebrew? It sounds like you do a lot of campaign setting stuff.
Yeah, it's mostly campaign settings at this point. One of the things I'll do sometimes is what I call a development playtest, which is when I'll start to write a product and I'll get to a point where I don't know what to do. So I'll call up my players. I'm like, hey, we're going to play. I'll go there and I'll run up to the point where I've stopped writing. And I'm like, where do you go next? And I'll let them lead my development. And so I'll kind of ad lib it from there. We'll run the game. I'll take notes. I'll come back and I'll start creating from there. So even if you're writing in, say, the Forgotten Realms, you are still creating when you write on products. You're still creating your own world as well. It's a smaller world. It's got to be more focused and maybe a more narrow storyline, but you're still creating something yourself. You're still creating a homebrew of some kind.
So I just leveled up one of our regulars to be a moderator, but no, that's true as well. Like whether it's just this dungeon is homebrew or this town, it's just a matter of scope and scale.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll run a few games just ad lib, just to make sure that skill is getting honed, and then sometimes if I'm playtesting, I will not ad lib at all, and I will run directly from the adventure because that's what I'm playtesting. To make sure that the adventure is working. So it all depends on the audience, what we're trying to get out of the session and so on. But I do have a regular campaign that I play in. So I get to try different things as a player as well, not just as a DM or just as a game writer.
Now, you had mentioned, and I had actually seen that you had worked on Star Trek. Is that the most recent iteration?
Yep, the one that just came out earlier this year.
Okay, because I know some of our staff writers and our chief and nerdator over on the website had been playing some of that. I have not had a chance to take a look at it. So you want to give the elevator pitch on Star Trek for the folks that maybe don't even know that it's out?
Yeah, well, as you mentioned, there have been several iterations. I assume everyone knows what Star Trek is. There have been several iterations of the game over the years, and then the license will be brought back to CBS. And then when there's enough demand for it, then they will give the license out again. And Modiphius Adventures was the publisher that got the license recently. So they have a set amount of time to create a game, and they've started really strongly with the core rules for Star Trek Adventures, which is what they're calling the game. It uses a system called the 2D20 system. If you play Conan, it's that same system, only it's been tweaked a bit to fit the Star Trek theme. And Star Trek is a whole different beast as compared to Star Wars or certain fantasy games, because you don't kick down the door, kill the monster, take the treasure in Star Trek. It's a little more cerebral. It's a little more there's moralities, there's some ethics involved, there's that sort of thing. So this system still has a way for you to resolve situations using dice, but it kind of almost takes a little fate turn where you have different aspects, different um, ethical makeup. You have the prime directive, you have things like that play a role in how your character plays at the table, then progresses throughout the campaign. So it's been an interesting thing. I worked on helping out with the book as a whole, but I didn't really do any of the development. I wrote the adventure that came with the book, and then I've been working on the living campaign that gives you a choice to play either in the next generation era or in the original series era. One adventure a month is released, so you can play that, and it turns 1 month at a time into an ongoing story.
What is your preference, the original series or next gen?
My preference is the next generation, but the way we split up the work, I ended up with the original series. So I went back through and I've been watching the original series again. My daughter, who is now old enough to watch and understand these shows, has been watching them with me. And it's just kind of an interesting, it's a little bit different, but we can kind of take the some of the things that are dated from the show, update the essence of it without changing the mechanics of what they could actually do with a ship, what they could actually do with the technologies that they had, as opposed to the next generation. So there's definitely two different stories in the living campaign, although they tie together. What's happening in the original series campaign is kind of learning about something that becomes the main focus of the next generation series. And the next generation series is really cool because it touches on things that went on in the next generation and Deep Space Nine and Voyager and so on. So if you're interested in the game and if you're interested in that living campaign, just go to the Modifius website, search on the Star Trek living campaign, and you can have access to all that.
Tucker Author asked, and I think the answer is yes. Maybe you know for sure.
Yes. I don't know.
No, is the same system that GNS is using for the Shield of Tomorrow? I think it is.
I don't know for sure.
It's a newer show that they're doing. Well, and I can only imagine it.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about a different game. You're talking about the actual play podcast Shield of Tomorrow. Yeah. They're using the Modifius Star Trek Adventures game.
Yeah, I talked for a while with Sam when we were out in LA, and Sam is one of the cast members. So,
yep.
Which is cool. I mean, now like we're talking about games and streaming, and there's like just so much stuff out there. Like when D&D decided to do their own Twitch channel and moved everything to Twitch, and they're streaming every day.
Right. You can literally watch D&D 24/7, which if that's your thing, man, that's awesome. If that's your entertainment, you're entertained. Are you not entertained?
That's it. Now I know a creator friend of mine kind of got upset when they did it. And, he's like, "Oh man, won't they leave us something?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, it doesn't work that way. People are going to still, people are going to watch that. People are going to watch what we do and what you do. And some people are going to see the stuff that Wizards of the Coast puts out and hate it. And then they're like, that's not real D&D. And they're not going to watch it. And some people only want to watch that. So like, there's something for everybody out there.
And that's the joy of the game, right? Because you can play D&D in so many different ways. You can play really on a grid and super focused on combat. You can play Theater of the Mind where you hardly ever roll a die. There's so many different ways to play, so many different types of players, so many different types of GMs. And we're seeing that as we watch these podcasts. We went to the theater to watch the Acquisitions Incorporated live broadcast of their game from PAX. And we watched it, we laughed, it was fine. We left and we're like, man, I'd love to play that game. Because it's not D&D what they're doing, but it is D&D what they're doing, and so you can take the game and you can do what you want with it. And if you don't like what Wizards is doing in terms of streaming, there's a ton of stuff out there.
And I think people from our era have a little bit of better handle on this, only because like every time you play D&D somewhere is different. It was almost a different game because there was no way to, there's no congruity because everyone just kind of like learned the game how they learned it. It's not like we can all tune into the same shows and learn it that way.
Yeah, I learned not by reading the first edition Player's Handbook or DMG. I learned by the guys I played with, who were older than I was, and they had their own way of playing. And so when D&D Next started and they started doing the play tests, I went back and I played a game from each of the previous editions. And I went back and looked at my first edition Player's Handbook, and I'm like, dude, this is not the game I was playing when I was growing up. This is nowhere near what I was playing. And because exactly as you said, every group played differently.
You know what? Shallander brings up a really interesting point, and that is Twitch has all RPGs placed under the D&D category, which pisses off so many people in the non-D&D streams. But like, I bet they'd be equally mad like if they didn't get their own category, right? But
Yeah.
like, the D&D brand is so big that if you go to someone that doesn't know what a role-playing game is and ask them about D&D, they'll have an idea of what D&D is. If you ask them about role-playing, like you could get any multiple different answers.
Yeah, I think once it grows to the point where people are aware of the difference, and I don't mean gamers, I mean people in general are aware of the difference between D&D and other RPGs, then it's time to make that separate category so people can find their thing. But if you're just a novice who doesn't know the difference between D&D and Dungeon World and Fate and Numenera or whatever, and you want to be under D&D because that's where the people are looking. I think that's just a different way of saying what you just said.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And besides, it would also just be it'd be other role playing games,
right?
And D&D anyway, because you can break them all up.
Right. And I've heard people over the years really hate on Wizards and hate on TSR, but their success is important for the industry as a whole. Their success brings people to the game, and then people can find their own game within that once they understand the RPG world. So, Wizards doesn't always make the decisions I would make, and sometimes they make decisions I hate, but I always root for their success because their success means that Star Trek Adventures gets a little more notice, and any other game you want to talk about gets a little more notice in the long term as the hobby grows.
So someone else kind of weighed in. My friend from Cardboard Fortress, doesn't hurt to call it role-playing games. I actually would disagree in the sense that the minute someone has to stop and think about what does this mean, they've already moved on. Now, maybe they could do it better, and it could be Dungeons and Dragons and role-playing games, and at least then you could teach by association.
Right.
But I feel like you still need that brand recognition at this juncture.
Yeah, and it depends on where the hobby is at the time. If the hobby is continuing to grow as it is right now, you want that name recognition. That's so important to have people come to the right place, and then from there see what they like within that. And if it was the other way around and it wasn't growing and there were too many niches, then you could go off and you could do that because the hobby would already know exactly what all those categories meant.
But on the plus side, I feel like we're going to get there. It's just a matter of time. Everything is exponential with the internet.
Yeah, this is true. This is true. And if a D&D movie comes out, which I heard was announced very recently, that it would be what, June or July something 2021. Hopefully that will also say, there's this whole other thing out here. D&D isn't just a movie. There's this game, and then you introduce people that way, and they can split off and find the game that fits them.
So forget like right or wrong. What do you feel like the D&D movie should be, since you brought it up?
Oh man, that is a tough question. I am a pessimist at heart, and so my general take is If it's a D&D movie that hardcore D&D players love, it will flop. And if it is a movie that D&D aficionados and longtime players hate, it'll do great. Just because we're expecting different things. I mean, just look at Star Wars now, right? It's the greatest movie ever made. No, it's an abomination, and it's worse than episodes 1 and 2, depending on where you come from. So, yeah, I don't know if you can do it in a way that's going to satisfy everyone. I liked when they said that what they wanted to do would have the feel of Guardians of the Galaxy. That's a whole different animal because that was a comic book series that wasn't kind of the A-list, right? It wasn't, X-Men. It was a lower thing. So there was a little less of that. It has to be this way or I will hate it going in. And I think they did a fairly good job with that. If you could get that feel, but also throw in some Easter eggs and some nods to we hardcore D&D fans, then there's a chance it would work. But you have to remember that the RPG industry is about 2% of the total hobby gaming industry, which is only $1 billion. So you're talking what, $32 million worth of sales to what is us, a niche market. Movies don't gross hundreds of millions of dollars if they're focused on just that niche. They need to focus out. So it's a different genre, and we'll see how it can work.
I'm super curious to see what they do, because especially with what we have, what they've done in the past, like, hopefully, I feel like this team is going to respect it so much more than it has in the past. But at the same time, have you seen darn it, of Dice and Men?
I have not. I've looked at the books, but I haven't.
Totally separate from the books.
Okay, no.
So there's a movie that came out of Dice and Men. Check it out. It's on Amazon Prime, and it really just tells a really good story about a group of people that happen to play role-playing games. They happen to play Dungeons and Dragons. They couldn't actually say Dungeons and Dragons and use the books for props or whatever because they couldn't get permission. But clearly they're playing. You watch and they're playing Dungeons and Dragons, and they do this combination of the people at the table and their lives and the game, and it's done really well.
Yeah,
especially for not being a big budget movie. But prior to that, I was like, they should do something like Lord of the Rings, but with maybe Icewind Dale or something. Right. And then after seeing that, I'm like, you know what, maybe not, because that if you do like Lord of the Rings, it's just it's just another fantasy movie. It's not D&D.
Yeah, and when you make any piece of literature, art, movie, so on, when you create it, I mean, what did Guardians of the Galaxy do? The first half of the movie is they're introducing the characters, right? And so when you create a movie, you have to do that. So you have to have an interesting story for the characters, interesting characters that people can relate to, but they're different enough that you can that you find them interesting. And you can't tell a really big epic story when the first hour of the movie is introducing characters and telling their backgrounds and getting you wrapped up in their lives. So the first movie has to be small. It can't be, we're going to save the world from, that's too much. So you have to do, the characters, they have to go into Undermountain for some reason. And here's the yawning portal. And we're going to see the cool people that are at the yawning portal waiting for everyone to go down in Undermountain. And then what happens in Undermountain has to be cool, different. You have to do it in a short amount of time. Hopefully introduce the characters while they're actually doing the thing that they're doing there. But then have a bigger story in the background waiting. So if the movie does well, then you can expand it out that next step. It's a minefield, and along the way, some unhappy people are going to be blown up on one of those mines. But hopefully it can capture the spirit of the game while still being a good movie.
And that is kind of like the trick, because it had been brought up in one of these live chats before that D&D has become like its own genre. Mm-hmm. So how do you capture that on a film and make it feel like its own genre for people that don't know what D&D is, other than they've heard it, nerds play it, there's dice, they may worship the devil, we don't know. How do you convey that to the outside world?
Right. Yeah, and you do it through cool characters. You do it through fun characters that people like to watch and can feel for. Like Guardians of the Galaxy. I'll keep coming back to that, as a good movie that a lot of people loved.
It was also a good comic book, even though it was one of the ones I used to like read all the comic books that like other people didn't read.
Right.
But I what do you expect? My gateway comic book was Alpha Flight. Hey, which is really close to your hometown. So there you go. As far as superheroes go. Yeah. We are past the hour mark. I know you're on your lunch break, so I don't want to detain you any longer. But I want to thank you for coming. If you have any final words you want to tell the people watching, and then we'll wrap it up.
You can follow me on Twitter at Shawn Merwin. I love to talk with people about gaming and stuff. If you are so inclined, you can check out the podcast Down with D&D, where we talk about all different sorts of gaming related topics. So thanks all for listening. Had a lot of fun. Thanks for the questions.
And conveniently, you can find those links in the description. I think I just have to fix the podcast one, but I'll get to that momentarily. Again, thanks everyone for hanging out. Thanks for coming on, Shawn. It was a blast.
My pleasure.
Next time, guys, stay nerdy.